Okay, gonna go ahead and get started. Um, my name is Joel Thomas, as most of you probably know by now. Today we're gonna be doing a little bit of a kind of review of a training that I had put together a few months ago. What I did is kind of shortened that training, took the video and edited it down a little bit so it cuts out some of the awkward silences from myself mostly, and hopefully it's a little bit more bearable to get through. So wanted to kind of go through that. It'll be a little bit of review. That's about, I think, 17 or 18 minutes long. And then kind of open it up after that to Q&A if there is any. And also some of you had reached out to me asking to see, maybe a time impact analysis example of something I would put together for justification for a time extension on a change order. So I was going to just kind of take a look at one that I had recently done on one of the projects I'm on. And like I say, we can just have it be more of a Q&A type of thing as well. That said, let's jump on into this. So first, I just wanted to kind of show, oh wait, hang on one second. I want to make sure. Okay. So first, I just wanted to show you guys, on the wiki where we actually have all of these trainings as well. We did just update. I think we have 6 or 7 trainings that just got updated on the site here. So, try to periodically check, and we'll probably send out some kind of newsletter or email to everyone, letting everyone know once we do add those new trainings. But the one we're going to look at today is on the wiki, so feel free to go in and check it out. Just a little bit of review on how to navigate the wiki. So this is the homepage here, h.wiki. If you don't have a login yet, you can reach out to econ at QRSE, and we'll make sure we get you set up in there. But I would just go to my login and log into the site. My site looks a little different than yours. Yours will just look like this once you log in. Real quick on just finding trainings, you can search it. The search bar is much improved than what it was in our previous wiki site. So if I were to just type schedule, for example, I can see that there are, the trainings are popping up. So we have parts 1, 2, and 3. Today we're going to focus on that part 3, end of the project schedule review. So this is one way that you can find the trainings. If you want to just, go in and look for it other ways, you can go into construction, and then you'll see your 3 categories of pre-construction, construction, and closeout. And you could see the schedule trainings that we put in here would be schedule training part 1 is the initial baseline schedule, and that's kind of under the pre-construction part of a project. Schedule training 2, the progress schedule update review, which is under construction. And then we're going to be looking at the schedule training part 3, end of project schedule review. If I click this link, it's going to take me into there's kind of a just text version of the training that goes through, some of the key elements of what you're looking for with project schedule reviews. So if you guys are interested, read through this, and you can kind of just see some of the different pieces of the training just in text form here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit play on this, and then we will
welcome in. Today, we're going to be talking
together
through the end of a construction project schedule, including project delay analysis and the evaluation of liquidated damages. Let's jump right in. An as-built schedule is a CPM or critical path method schedule that depicts the start and completion date, duration, costs, and consumed resources for each activity. The contractor is responsible for submitting the initial baseline schedule, subsequent schedule updates, and the final as-built schedule for the project. The owner, or HDOT, is responsible for reviewing the as-built schedule for accuracy and evaluating project delays. A key role HDOT holds regarding construction schedules is time management. Successful schedule tracking helps minimize and mitigate delays. Delay equals more money for the contractors, HDOT, or both. A deeper understanding of delay ownership is critical, particularly at the end of a project. Specification section 10805E, contractors' continuing schedule submittal requirements require updated schedules are submitted by the contractor every 2 weeks. There's no specification required for when the final as-built schedule is required, but you can use the same spec requirement listed above. We should be receiving at a minimum monthly schedule updates, so the final as-built schedule should be submitted soon after the work is completed. Where do these schedules get uploaded? All CPM schedule updates, including the final as-built schedule, are required per HSS 10806, so the contractor shall submit schedules through the submittal module on ACC. HDOT sets a review workflow to the appropriate reviewer, project engineer, the scheduler, or the construction manager, whoever reviews those schedules for your project. Use ACC to complete your review of the final as-built schedule. The Hawaii standard specifications are really important. The schedule tab in ACC, you're able to upload and import your raw schedule files to do the review there. You can also review the PDF printout of the as-built schedule, make whatever comments are needed, and then return those to the contractor through ACC. And now we're moving over to milestones. We have had a lot of discussion on these milestones and the importance. We do have other trainings that can go more into this. Today, we are going to be focusing on the pre-final inspection, the final inspection, the contractual completion, and the substantial completion, and how we use them as tools to look at delays or liquidated damages. Now we're taking a look at the specifications involving delay. HSS section 10805, this is the section on contract time. This is a very important specification to understand, especially when you're evaluating or looking at delay. Section A discusses the calculation of contract time, whether you're in working days or calendar days. Section B discusses more in depth on the modification of contract time. And then subsections 1 is delays caused by the state, 2, delay for permits, 3, delays beyond the contractor's control. Notification requirements are in there. Section 4, delays in delivery of material or equipment, 5, delays for suspension of work, 6, contractor caused delays, and then 7, reduction in time. I did want to highlight a couple of key things within the specifications involving delay. This first one here is 10805B, which does require the contractor to provide written notice to the engineer not more than 5 working days after the occurrence of the event that causes a delay or justifies a contract time extension. So we need to make sure we're getting these notifications in due time. If the contractor believes that HDOT is the owner of a delay, then those things should be brought to HDOT in a timely manner so that HDOT has a chance to successfully manage or mitigate that delay if at all possible. To have these delays, being notified of the delays and understanding these delays as they're happening is really critical for the project to move forward. Section 10805B1, this discusses how the contractor must show how the critical path will be affected. At the request of the engineer, the contractor must show how the critical path will be affected and must also support the time extension request with schedules, as well as the statements from its subcontractors, suppliers, or manufacturers. So basically what this is saying is when they submit the notification to us, they need to also show us how and why this schedule is being impacted and being pushed out. And they have to show it on the critical path, why the delay to this activity is causing delay to the entire project. 10808B, this discusses the liquidated damages during the punch list period. And understanding that when the contractor fails to complete the work within the contract time and you're into the punch list period of your project, the pre-final milestone has been completed, then we can go in and it would be a lesser charge of liquidated damages at 20% of the amount of the liquidated damages established in your contract. Also wanted to highlight 10805B3 little b. It discusses the compensation during rain days. We do not grant additional compensation when there are rain days. 10813A, pre-final and final inspections. So the contractor shall notify the engineer that the work has reached substantial completion and is ready for the pre-final inspection. Now we're going to transition this over so that we can walk through an actual example of an end of project schedule analysis, delay analysis, and a liquidated damages assessment.
when we get to the end of a project, maybe we haven't sorted out the delays. A lot of times during construction, you're just trying to get the work completed and move on, and hey, we'll handle the time part later. We got to the end of the project, we hadn't granted any time extensions. In this case, the contractor, they've written us a letter saying that they're requesting an additional 70 calendar days be added to the contract and $455,000 for the extended overhead attributable to that delay. They've split it into 4 delay periods here, different justifications for each of those delays, final weekly statement of working days, and then a time-related overhead calculation. I'm going to flip this over to my version of this that has comments. So 70 calendar day time extension, $6,500 in overhead per calendar day, and that came out to the 455. So that's what they're asking for. Delay number 1, they were asking for a 14 calendar day delay. Delay 2 was a 34 calendar day. Delay 3 was a 19 calendar day. The 4th delay period was the rain days, where they had 3 calendar days. Now, when I counted all 4 of these up, I came up with 70. They're asking for compensation for all of this. What we would need to do is we're going to go through and do an analysis on all of these delay periods, determine if there was any concurrent delays. This first exhibit was for delay 1. It looks like it's a letter that they had written on October 2nd, 2025, which was the day that that delay started. So they meet the spec of 10805B, where they provided notification at the time of the delay. It was within that 5-day window, so that part of it checks out. It says the delay will impact the material procurement of steel needed to construct PCC in both phases 1 and 2, which we know was on the critical path. They also included, per spec 10805B1, analysis showing how this delay is pushing on my critical path, and I'll zoom in a little bit so you can see. There's my delay. It was added on October 2nd, and it looks like it's pushing out my critical. As long as we're in agreement that that was extra work, say we've done that merit check. From a schedule standpoint, I would agree that this delay pushed the critical path for the project. My second delay letter also met the specs. So both of those delay periods 1 and 2, I've determined that from a schedule standpoint, I would agree those did push the critical path, and the notifications met the specs. This third one, it was a punch list delay notification. So this letter that they're including as their justification was actually the letter where they were requesting substantial completion. And I've seen this before. That's why I wanted to use it as an example. There's nothing in this letter about delay. So I was just adding note that this letter met the spec of 10813A, but it does not meet or support the delay notification requirements in 10805. And then you'll see this too, a printout of a PDF. An email does not count as an official notification for a delay per spec. For the purposes of this training, I am going to reject merit on this. We've all seen this before. They're claiming that the delay at the end of the project was due to all of this. And then I just added this in too, because I've seen this a bunch where they're trying to say, hey, you know, our notification was noted on our weekly statement of working days, where here they had this comment added where they were reserving the right to time adjustment due to delays. They highlighted it, and they're just saying, yeah, like everyone knew that we were in delay. In this case, they didn't meet that spec. Kind of the last piece of the puzzle here is looking at that overhead rate for the time-related overhead. It's usually just going to be a bunch of data that helps justify whatever number they've come up with. For the purposes of this, I'm just going to say, yes, this was good. We did come up with $6,500 per calendar day. And what I want to do now is kind of take a look to try to find those concurrent delays. So I took my last project schedule and I already updated it. I'm in my schedule module in ACC, right? So basically what I'm doing here is I'm going to compare my very last version of this schedule, which is the as-built at the end, to the very first one. So I just want to see what happened on this project. Where were their deltas? They have all these pre-made filters here, and this is showing me all of the changes that happened on the project. So there's 143 items. So basically things are going to happen. Dates are going to move from what you had planned to what you actually did. Critical path filter. So this is just going to show me what happened on the critical path for the project, where the delays were and what pushed out. And if you actually peel this back one layer here, you can see duration. This is how I'm going to find my concurrent delays. Looking through this, anytime you see these little arrows, it's telling you this date pushed beyond what this showed. Black lettering here is the as-built schedule, so the final, and then the pink is the first schedule. Looking through this, you'll see all these carrots, and these are kind of more like the bigger buckets of activities. I'm kind of just trying to find these actual activities and to see where there were differences. And I would make note of all of these delays where we had some shifts. So in this case, looks like cold planing was supposed to be 2 days, but the contractor took 6 days. So that's a delay. This tells me the contractor cost us 4 days right here. I'm not exactly sure how that lined up with my delay periods, but you're going to kind of go through these. This guardrail, it looks like was supposed to go in. It took 21 days instead of 20 days. So I'm just kind of going through this and making comments where I see a duration bust. Looks like the signage was an extra 4 days. There's an extra day here. And then you'll see this too. If you see this green arrow, that means you actually saved time. So it looks like procurement of our long lead materials, we actually saved some time. The contractor did. I would usually take note of that's how you're going to kind of see what happened to the schedule in the end. Looks like the punch list was, as we know, it was 34 days to get through. They had 9 on their schedule. Blanket grinding was supposed to be 5 days. It took 10. Compaction, testing of subgrade, it was supposed to be 2 days. It took 9. Base course placement, 5. It took 10. So I would just kind of go through this list here and make my chart on the side. So what I do is draw it out, what happened on the project. In this case, I kind of used some color coding on these activities just to show you what all this is. This is just where contract work was completed. The red here is where we know there were HDOT delays per our TIA. I added in the rainouts just to show those periods of time because we know we're going to have to give time for that. The closeout, I just made blue just so we know, and this is how I denote it with those 2 milestones, right? On the bookends, I can see, okay, the pre-final was here. So this becomes my closeout period to the substantial completion date. Now what I do is I'm going to drop in all of my concurrent delays that I found in ACC. And I just wanted to see, hey, where were the contractor delays in my critical path? So I sort of ended up plotting those in and just found out there was a concurrent delay here within our known delay period. What this says is both HDOT and the contractor were driving delay. So out of that 14 days, they were on the hook for 7 days. We just look through all of this and see where everything landed. I see there were 2 separate delays in this delay period that we were going to grant them. That's how I found my concurrent delays. Then what I would do is I would just go through delay by delay and do my analysis of those sections. So for this delay period 1, we had 14 calendar days compensable is what they were claiming. In my TIA analysis, I said, okay, out of those 14 days, there was a concurrent delay of 7 days. So in the end, HDOT would own 7 calendar days compensable and 7 days non-compensable due to that concurrent delay. We would still give them the 14-day period of time because a concurrent delay, we give time but no compensation. And then I would just go through each of these delay periods and do more or less the same. The delay period 2, we had 34 calendar days that they were claiming compensable. When we looked through it, we found that there were 9 days of concurrent delay. So we ended up with 25 calendar days compensable and 9 calendar days non-compensable. For that delay 3, with the rainouts per HSS 10805B3 little b, no compensation is allowed for weather-related delays. It's in the spec. So in the end, we would just determine, okay, we're going to give 3 calendar days non-compensable. For delay period 4, that was the punch list delay. The contractor was claiming 19 calendar days compensable. After our TIA analysis, we said the contractor did not follow HSS 10805B, and we also disagreed that the punch list was anything being asked of them outside of contract. So in the end, we just denied merit on that, and we're saying there's no calendar days that we're giving them for this delay period. So when I do my side-by-side analysis, the contractor was claiming 70. They, by admission without notification, they were on the hook for 18 days in LDs because they were claiming 70 and we were 88 days over. So that's the delta. After our analysis, we ended up going, okay, we're going to give 32 compensable calendar days, 19 non-compensable calendar days, and then 37 calendar days in LDs. Liquidated damages, as I mentioned early on, we need to kind of split these up into the different periods that to be able to figure out how much they get charged. So kind of looking at that first period, I found that there were 25 calendar days within the closeout that the contractor was causing the delay. So based on how that spec is written, we're doing 25 calendar days, $5,000 per calendar day is my LDs for this project. So 20% of 5,000 is 1,000. So you end up with 25 calendar days times $1,000 per day equals 25,000 in LDs just for this closeout period. And the remaining 12 days of LDs, where were those at? Those would have fallen into what I showed you earlier, where they caused their own slippages on the schedule. So because this was during contract work and before the pre-final inspection, this would be 12 calendar days at the full $5,000 per calendar day, and you end up with 60,000 in LDs there. We're finalizing it. We're doing a time extension of 51 calendar days, 32 of which are compensable. So this is kind of like the financial side. And then we end up with $208,000 that we would give to the contractor. But then we also need to factor in those LDs. We ended up with 85,000 in LDs, giving them the 51 days. That's going to move our contractual completion date from February 25th to April 17th. Final cost with this change order would be $208,000 in overhead minus the 85,000 in LDs. And we end up paying $123,000 with that 51-day extension.
Okay, so hopefully today's training was helpful for you. Understanding delay and how to analyze delay is critical for effective project management. Thanks all, and see you on the next one.
Okay, so the video kind of comes at you fast, but hopefully it's helpful to some of you guys. So like I mentioned, does anyone have any questions on any of this material? I know some of it is review. We did do that previous training on this, but I would just say, probably the most important thing is keeping track of your delays as they're occurring in your project. That's the easiest way to do this. If you're waiting to the end of the project, you're just kind of setting yourself up for a little bit of hardship and trying to figure out what happened and when and all that. So if you're kind of, my recommendation would be, even if you're in the middle of your project and you haven't started doing this yet, is to just really try to zero in on where you're at with contract time remaining, and then trying to come up with some sort of log that is tracking. I do it on a monthly basis. At the end of every month, I take a look at my schedule and then try to determine, okay, has my end date shifted? And then figuring out which activities went long and just kind of keeping note of all that, so that what'll happen is, a lot of times at the end of a project, when the contractor realizes, oh shoot, I'm 3 months behind on this schedule, maybe they weren't tracking it well on their side, they're going to try to find areas where they point blame back, saying, oh, we were delayed here and we were delayed there. So I think it's an important piece is to just make sure during the construction contract with your contractor is that you're keeping that conversation going. And a good way to do it actually is the way, and I'll show you real quick, is going to use one of my projects as an example, just because. But so we have like a running meeting minutes this is for the Ola Lane project. Some of you are familiar with it. It's the eastbound freeway widening project. But what I do is I have a little section in my weekly meeting minutes where we kind of talk through the CPM schedule, and I'll take all of our kind of key milestones, and basically I update these every month when we get our new schedule, and kind of just throw the dates at everyone. And I'll say, okay, our contractual completion date is still sitting here, and that's NTP of 1/2/24 plus 480 working days plus change order 8 plus change order 12 plus 3 rainouts. And just to kind of keep an accurate record of where we're at, and that's the contractual side. And then we have our current substantial completion, which, is a pretty big delta from what this date is. But by tracking it this way, and then I'll say, okay, the previous schedule, we were at this date, now we're at this date. And then down below on all of our, I would say, the more critical milestones for the project, that for these dates, we need to know specifically for, getting that information to DIRP so they can get the notices out for these major pieces of work that we have coming up on this project. But these dates are all tied to the critical path. So every time our critical path shifts, basically all these dates shift. And so we're trying our best to not let these dates slip, but there are things that happen on projects, and just trying to keep track of kind of who owns what delay is a really critical piece to all of this. And as I had mentioned, I was going to show you, I did work on a time impact analysis for this project. We had a roughly 1 year delay that we're trying to sort out right now, and it was due to some major redesign that we had to do to our water vault. But just wanted to kind of show you what, at least, a TIA, it's just all you're trying to really do is tell a story of, how, what the delays are, and then who owns it, and just trying to put that information together so that someone that isn't as familiar with the project could read through it and understand, okay, this is why this project is in delay. And then kind of part of that analysis is determining the delay ownership. But so like I said, there's not a set way you have to do this. I was just trying to show an example of sort of what I have, or what I had done on this project. But so I start out with kind of just a list of contents. We have a schedule summary, and then a schedule time impact, and then the time impact analysis delay narrative. I know that these all kind of are jargon. They sound sort of the same. And then I add in all my attachments that kind of back up this data that I'm putting in the narrative up top. But I'll just kind of roll through this a little bit. So for my schedule summary, basically I would take, this is like, you could call it the highest level of, where the schedule is at on the project. And I started with schedule 0, which is the baseline, which was submitted back in December of 2023. And I think we got it approved on the 15th. Our actual work started on 2 weeks later. It was on January 2nd, 2024. But I would put a column for all of our schedule updates. So basically every month we would get an update on our schedule. And then I would put the contractual end date in there for each of those schedules. So it was December 8, 2025 to start. And then it looks like around July 24, we did grant that first time extension change order. So that increased our contractual time up to January 5th, 26. And then we had another one in November-ish where we granted some additional time, and that pushed our contractual completion to 1/13/26. And then this column shows the substantial completion, which is, basically what the actual schedule is showing. And as you can see, even our very first baseline schedule carried negative float. So this was, to explain this, basically what happened was the contractor, they said, hey, the best we can do is this. And they were not meeting the contract time, which was 480 working days. They just said there's no way we can meet that. So what we did is we approved the schedule as noted, and the note was, you carry the risk of liquidated damages if you can't find mitigation measures to kind of help pull that date back. So, and they were asking us to grant them additional time, and we said, no, we can't do that because, when contracts are signed, or, when there's the RFP and we don't want to just grant additional time on a contract when we first start it, because it could cause a case of protest, right, from other contractors saying, well, if I knew we would have had this extra time, maybe my bid would have been different. So we can't do that. And I explained that to them. So we ended up just saying, all right, you guys are on the hook for 113 days of potential LDs at the end of the contract. But anyway, so create this table, and then each schedule, we would have like this first update that we got for February of 2024. We had an added 24 working days to our substantial completion date. And basically this column is just, it's like the previous substantial completion date, the delta between that and our current. So the 24 days was added to February, and then our float went from -113 to -137. So we were losing time early on this project, and you can kind of see here. So this table is just showing me at the high level like what happened on our schedule. And if you go all the way down to the June 25 update, and I think I did this TIA around early July. We're still working to finalize it, but anyway, so we ended up at -402, right? So there's some obvious major delays on this project, which is kind of the point of putting this TIA together. And then I would go and I would kind of summarize each of those schedules and say exactly what activities drove out the project each month. So it was like, our baseline schedule we already talked about, but when you're looking at things like our February update, we lost 24 days, like I said. So we had the revised substantial completion date and the negative float. I always add a little bullet point saying, whether or not the critical path changed on this schedule update, because that does happen too. On this project, our critical path is pretty straightforward. It's very, there's no real questions on that, but sometimes it is important to note, whenever you see a critical path change, maybe something new pops up and takes longer than it should, and then that takes over the critical path. That's where you would kind of add that information in. Excuse me. But yeah, on this February update, we had an 18 working day delay period due to permit approvals with city. And so with permit delays, that's in the spec as well. I can't remember the spec off the top of my head, but basically we would grant time but no compensation. So for that part of it, that ended up being a change order, and it's noted in here. So HDOT granted this time with change order 8. So we gave them 18 working days. They also lost an additional 6 days that month, and that was due to the electrical subcontractor starting work later than they planned. And I just kind of added that note, like they were supposed to start on this date, they didn't, and that caused another 6 days of slippage on our schedule. So just kind of going through monthly and just figuring out where things went wrong, or, so for a lot of this, it was, the contractor was causing slippage just based on the durations taking longer than they thought they would, for those critical elements of the schedule. Then I get down to, the August area, or August 2024. And so that was kind of where we started to really lose time. We did have 6 working days delay during early August, where HECO had required this like alternative grounding method. So we had to end up doing like, we couldn't get our grounding in for one of the manholes we were putting in. So we had to end up doing like a 100-foot trench or something. I can't remember exactly how it landed. And then, doing this whole thing. So we ended up giving them an additional 6 days because of that. And that was executed through change order 12. Then in kind of mid to late August 2024, we ended up, through our probing activities with the contractor, we found out that one of the major where we had to do all of our water line work was in, there was a big conflict with an underground Hawaiian Telcom duct bank that at first we were like, oh, we'll just move it. But then we found out that we could not move it. It was apparently, it fed internet to all of downtown Honolulu or something. It was a real big duct bank, and it was all transite pipe, and it was just a mess. So the only thing we could do is we had to redesign our water line. We had a vault and line stops and all this stuff. And this is a 42-inch water line, so it's a big one. So it ended up costing the project quite a bit of time. So that was sort of where the big problems of our project started in the August update, and then it rolled all the way down through basically through, I think it was April 25. So, I was just kind of keeping track of all that in my, little narrative here, and then I go into the full schedule time impacts, and that's where I sort of split it up into different delay periods. So basically taking all that information above and then rolling it into a little bit, more manageable chunks and saying, okay, delay period 0. I know people don't love that I use 0, but I just use it for my baseline schedule. It's a little bit easier for me because then when you get your first schedule update, they always call it update number 1. So in my mind, I start at 0 with the baseline, but you can do it however you want. So for that one, I just wanted to add note that's where we lost our 113 days because the contractor included that in their schedule. And then delay period number 1 was the 18 working days that we granted. So we already executed that change order, giving them those 18 days. Just wanted to highlight it here. And then kind of between February 24 and July 2024, we ended up losing a total of 49 working days. And I was just adding note that those were because of the contractor. There was just a bunch of inefficiencies that, or, areas where they realized, hey, this activity is going to end up taking us longer than it should. So they would add in additional time to some of their other activities, just ultimately pushing the critical path out. And then kind of had the 2 delay periods. So the one for that additional HECO work where we gave them a 6-day time extension through change order 12. So we know that one is there. And then really the meat of this TIA was to look at the delay period 4, and it was between the period of August 20th to September 1st. So 2025. Sorry. So you ended up with 254 working day delay to the critical path there. And then for this part, I just kind of went through and put I highlighted all the major dates. So 8/20 was when we were first impacted by this. And then on 4/25/25, that's when our redesign was completed and approved by BWS, and we were able to release the order for our material. And then 9/1, so September 1st, 2025, was our anticipated delivery of the long lead materials that were associated with the redesign, which I think we did have in hand. Now that we're past that date, I believe we did have them in hand by that date. I do need to kind of go in and update some of this based on actuals now that we're kind of in those actuals. And then this last part of the TIA is where I would just kind of go into the sort of the delay period 4 and how it relates, how it ties into our critical path, through just like a narrative kind of showing how we ended up getting to where we got. And, part of this, I just gave like a brief project background and then a critical path for this project. And I know the previous training I was doing, we were talking a lot about trying to find the concurrent delays and all that kind of stuff. For this particular project, we actually, it's a pretty well-defined and easy to understand critical path. We know that the longest path on our project is all tied to in this case, the Golik overpass, where we need to actually widen the bridge out, and then be able to accommodate the space underneath on the freeway to where we can widen that stretch. So our critical path has always been this same path here, and I don't see a case where it'll change, but I guess never say never. So where we got stuck on our critical path was we had to relocate all the utilities near Golick Overpass and Beckley Street, and then we had to install the line stops for the existing 42-inch water line. And this is actually pretty much where we got stuck, was like right here. Oh, whoops. So that's kind of more or less what I'm highlighting in this narrative, is saying, yeah, this is our critical path. This is where we got stuck, was pretty much at square one. And then there's like a narrative where I just explained, what the contractor did here. So on this date, they provided a notification, the letter. They completed probing activities, and they ended up having to work with the designers to come up with. We developed like a CAD alignment of the existing conflict duct bank so that we could figure out exactly where we would move our new water vault. We had to end up shrinking the water vault and doing all this other stuff just to make it all fit. And then I did a little section on sort of the specifications. So HSS 10805B, I noted that they met this requirement, and then B1, they also met this requirement. So contractually, they met the requirements. We're confirming that that delay period was on the critical path and was unavoidable. And then what I did here is I kept a really good log of everything that was happening with this delay. I mean, it was something that we were talking about every day or every other day for that entire kind of through April timeframe. So I just kind of put in my highlights of that log showing, what was happening during what periods in this delay. And this is sort of how I came up with like a fragnet for what the delay period looks like. And then in the end, it was just coming up with the conclusion that the critical path for the project was affected. We're going to grant the 254 working days. And then the contractual completion date would change from the 113 to 125/27. So we're still carrying a fair amount of LDs with granting this suspension, but that's just what we came up with as what we could do from a justification standpoint. And then just including all of the backup documentation. Like I had the 3-week schedule that shows that this 3-week schedule was given to us back in early August of 2024, and it was just kind of highlighting the critical path activity that ended up getting impacted. And then this is like the notification letter that they had submitted to us, giving us a heads up, and this was sent to us on August 19th, 2024. And sorry, real quick on this too. So if you're on projects and your contractor is in a meeting telling you guys, oh, we're being delayed, or we're about to experience a delay, make sure you guys tell them, just explain to them, hey, you have to get us proper documentation and show us on your schedule how this is occurring. It's not about trying to be sneaky and just being like, oh, they're not going to submit the documentation, they're not going to get the delay. I think it's about just making sure that we have all the documentation so that later on, when we go to grant a time extension, we have all that documentation to fall back on and say, yeah, they meet all the spec requirements and we're able to grant this time. So it's not a matter of, just not telling them and hoping that they forget or something like that. It's more, let's make sure that we're following the spec. So just tell them in the meeting that they're bringing it up. Just say, hey, you got to make sure you're getting in your notifications to us so that we can later justify this time. And then I included, like, we had meeting minutes where we discussed, and I think it was here where it came up and we discussed it, saying that the line stop locations, blah blah blah. So it's just like anything you can put in here that justifies what you were talking about up above. And one other thing that I was putting in here, sorry, this is like 134 pages of, I have all my RFIs in here that caused the delay. It's just, just backup information for an auditor or whoever wants to look through it all. And then I did have like this email chain, and that kind of shows the entire chain of events. It kind of backs up that log I mentioned where I was keeping track of where we were at with this delay throughout the entire period. So the last email was me telling them to make sure they put the order in for the material. So that was sent on the 28th of April. But so there's like a good 70 pages of email back and forth there. And then going to the bottom, I did add in the change orders that we gave them time extensions already, just so it's there for someone to understand that, yeah, we've granted this much time already. And then I like to put in like a day counter so that, there's no discrepancy on how many days we were giving them. I made sure I had all of our state holidays added into this right, and then kind of showed where the delay started, did a day count for each month, and then tallied it all up to end up getting, the 254 working days. The last thing I did was, and this one, I did this, but you can work with your contractor to put this together as well. This is basically it's a delay fragnet. So delay started from a start date to an end date and everything that happened in between. So it's not just showing like delay period. It's kind of gives you a little bit more data and information. I was just showing that the designer was involved, the contractor was involved, we were involved on the CM side, and we were all kind of working towards pushing on this because we knew it was affecting the contract. And then I also dropped in that fragnet to the schedule here. And this is where the delay got added in, and it's all right in here. So now you can kind of see it on the total schedule, how things were impacted. And like I said, usually the contractor is responsible to put this information together. So if you wanted to, let's say they sent you something that just had one long bar here saying delay, and you had like a log like this that you wanted it to show like every piece of that delay, you could always get them that information and ask that they drop it into either P6 or projects to be able to kind of show everything that happened within that delay period, just so it's all kind of there for everyone. All right, so I was just gonna take a looking at the comments. So Justin, yeah, you asked about the negative float. I guess that's a good question. I mean, they probably should have included something in the narrative saying that we're not going to be able to finish this project in 480 working days. In this case, they did not do that. So it was just, they got the contract, and then they passed that over to the project team, and the project team put the schedule together, and basically they were scratching their heads saying, we can't get this done in this amount of time. So they ended up basically having to put LDs onto their schedule. And then Marsh, you were saying recommend 2 tools for tracking purposes. Insist the previous week's worth be shown on the 3-week look ahead. Oh yeah, that's a good one. So he's talking about if I'll start with that one first, but I'll just look back at my example 3-week. But what Marshall is saying with his comment is, and I want to actually set up a 3-week schedule training too. It'd probably be a short one, but I think there are some positives that you could get from this. But what he's saying is you could add let's just put it right here. You would add a as-built week. And that would actually be the easiest way to keep track of your as-built schedule. So if you're keeping track of your schedule and you wanted to do it weekly, that would be the easiest way. So you ask your contractor, hey, can you add in a an as-built week so that we can, basically take that data every week and to create an as-built schedule. And then number 2 you had was maintain a spreadsheet with columns, delay description for the or issue, impact start date, impact end date, contractor notification, yes, no, associated RFI or field order. Yeah, I think those are good ideas. So that's another thing you could do is set up a spreadsheet that's kind of keeping track of all of those schedule related issues. I'd say whatever you think would be the best way to track these things, um, have at it. And that way actually does sound pretty good. I like that too. Hey, Michael, you had a question? Or you have your hand up?
Yeah, more of a comment. And I think we've all been in some of these situations where we see the contractors not finishing on time and but allowing them to submit a schedule with negative float can be problematic. And, probably just, like I said, not a question, more of a comment to discuss internally how to mitigate some of the risks involved by allowing the contractor to submit negative float on a CPM. And part of the question would be, is it physically possible to actually get this thing done on time? And inadvertently, would you be legitimizing, their claim that they can't finish on time? And maybe one way to mitigate that is a serial letter documenting that you're required to finish on time, and please submit a recovery schedule, and not necessarily allow them to say that we just can't finish on time. Anyway, just a comment.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And there was a lot of discussion on that early in the project. And that was our first stance, was that we kept telling them, you have to show us a schedule that completes on time. Like, what am I supposed to do with this? But the first one we got was actually much longer, not much longer, but I think it was like another couple months added in. So we did work with them to get it pulled back to what it was, but they were saying, there's just no way they could do it. I did appreciate it on some level, because I feel like, I'd rather that you are being upfront with me now, rather than, because what I've seen a lot of times is contractors will just constrain all their dates and hand you something that shows, and they're almost hoping that there's delay that kind of gets them out of the bind. But in my mind, at least they were being kind of upfront enough, saying, it's just not realistic. We can't make it work. Uh, to give you a little bit more backstory on this, even when we went back to the designers and we were asking them, hey, how did you guys come up with this schedule? And when they gave us their schedule, they actually had a schedule that showed, I think it was the same timeline as what the contractor was giving us. But what had happened was, someone wanted the project to get finished quicker than what it was shown. So even though it didn't make sense on paper, as far as a schedule, when they put it out for the bid, they said, no, we want it done in 2 years and not 2.5. So that's a little bit more backstory on it. There was a lot of discussion though. But I agree with you. Yeah, you never, it was very hard, especially in my schedule brain. I was like, I can't make sense of this. Like, how would I accept a schedule that doesn't show that you're meeting the contract to start with, right? It's like you're starting on kind of a bad foot. But in the end, they were willing to accept the LDs. And, to us, it was like, maybe you guys built in the LDs into your proposal, right? But yeah, I understand. Like, the whole point is we want the job to get done by a certain time. So, but I understand what you're saying.
Very good discussion. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Definitely. Yeah, does anyone else have anything? I know we're kind of coming up on the hour here, but I always enjoy talking schedule and all that. So if you think of something, you can always reach out to me as well. But yeah, I think, it's just harping back on the critical point of needing to keep track of your schedule as it goes, because when you get to the end of a project, it's much harder to, have to try to figure it out at that point. So trying to identify all the delays as they're occurring rather than wait till the end. Um, that's the best way. And I know another thing I'll add is I've seen a lot of projects that the contractor is not providing schedules or schedule updates. And I think just as a CM or even if you're just on the HDOT side, it's really important to just always enforce that, like every month saying, hey, where's your updated schedule? We need to see the as-built progress. We need to see kind of how this is looking at towards the end, understanding what your substantial completion date is looking like, especially when you're comparing it to the contractual completion date, and kind of, always sort of trying to keep tabs on that as you go through your project. But yeah, other than that, I'll just end it with, make sure you come in and take a look at the wiki, because we've got sort of those 3 schedule series that you can now go in and access in the different categories. They all have the videos that have been kind of truncated down, so they're not real long. They're all about 17, 18 minutes long. And they're kind of meant to be, in my mind, to be used as tools. So if you needed to like watch a certain section, pause it, take a look at your other screen or whatever, it's just there to be hopefully helpful to you. And like I said, we're continually updating tools and all these things and that you can use to sort of help do your reviews and look at schedules. And so as we get those updates, we'll update trainings and that sort of thing too. Oh, sorry, last one I see here. Can't we withhold payment for no schedule submittals? I think you can if you're not getting an updated schedule. I'd have to read up on the spec on that, but that does sound about right. I know it's been like that at like City County has that, and I think at Hart they had that. So I want to say at HDOT we do have that as well. Um, it doesn't I think it's just a matter of just making sure, telling your contractor, hey, make sure you're getting me monthly updated schedules. Telling that up front is always a good way to go. Yeah. Let me look into that, Justin, because you might be right. I just don't want to say one way or the other. Mike, did you have another one, or your hand's still up?
Last one.
Yeah.
Excellent presentation. Very good, Joel. How much time would you recommend spending on time management and risk management on a project like this? I fully agree with you that the only way to do it is to track delays as they occur. I found that I was putting about 8 to 10 hours a month minimum on some of our larger projects, because that's the only way to do it. It's not a minor issue. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, yeah, like I think the more time you can dedicate, the better, because at the end of the day, everyone, all they truly care about is when is this project going to get done? So being able to have that information to give answers to those people, and we all know, like on the upper management side of HDOT, they always want to know, like, hey, what's going on with this project? When's it going to be done? But if you can kind of clearly explain what's going on and why there's delays, and we're still evaluating this or that, I think, to put an actual time number on sort of what it requires, I would just say put more time into understanding what's going on with your schedule than you would think. It really does take quite a bit of effort to, especially like, I'll just say, like when I was working at Hart, I think they had a team of probably 7 to 10 schedulers full time dedicated over there. And so I don't know if, it's all relative or whatever, but it's an important piece for sure. Like project controls in general, schedule, budget, You know, all of these things, you know, the risks, looking at risks. That's another thing I do with schedule is I look at the critical path, and then you're trying to identify sections on your schedule. So like, for example, we, you know, on Ola Lane, we have drilled shafts that we have to do. So we were looking at the drilled shafts for our new bridge abutment. And then we realized, oh, look, there's overhead cables that are going to be in the way of our drill rig that weren't accounted for in the design. So we identified that way in advance. So we still have quite a bit of time to figure it out. Then we went out and met with DTS, and we're meeting with Spectrum and stuff to see what we can do to move those utilities. But, you know, had we waited, you might be in a whole different situation when you get to it. You're going out there with your drill rig going, oh, this isn't going to work. And then you're going to lose months and months trying to figure out relocation plans. So I think it's always kind of trying to stay water with looking long view at your schedule, and then looking at all the critical path things and trying to identify all the risk areas. So, you know, I'll literally like take my critical path and I'll kind of go out and look at the site and be like, okay, so we got to do that there. And is there anything that could be in the way, or is there any underground things? Maybe we got to send the contractor over to start probing now, or, you know, there's always things that can be done to try to mitigate those delays. And going back, that's the whole thing of the notification, right? So that's why we need the notification from the contractor. We need them to tell us what's going on, why is there a delay happening, where is the delay, because it gives us a chance to actually like mitigate and manage it, rather than getting hit with claims later and we just go like, wait, what? You were delayed, you know? Like, we want to be an active part of the solution.
Awesome. Thank you.
For sure. Yeah, like I said, we're always around. So if anyone else has questions you want to ask after, just shoot me an email. I'm Joel at QRSE. Other than that, I'll let you all go. We're a couple minutes over. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Joel.
Thanks, Joel.
Thank you.